Hi, welcome back to the shed for episode 32 of Great Guitar Build Off 2023. And in this episode, I promise faithfully that I will get the body wings glued on finally. But before we do that, we just still need to take one last look at that tremolo system. And the problem we've got with this tremolo is this block on the bottom of it is just too deep. This is a 36mm. Ideally, I think we need a 32 to make this work. So we're going to have to change this out. I have actually got the new block. This is a 32, exactly what we need. So it's now a case of stripping this to pieces and swapping out this block for the other one. Hopefully it's going to be quite straightforward. I've never really worked on these before. I've got an idea of how they work, so I think we should be fine. So first off, get some tools, and all we need is the 2 Allen keys that come with the tremolo, if I can get them out of the bag. And I'm just going to use this top off an aerosol just to hold all the little bits so we don't lose anything. And the first thing we need to do is just take off all 6 of the saddles. And to do that, we need to first remove this screw, because obviously we can't take them off with that in. And you need to be careful because there's a tiny little metal block in each of the saddles, if you can see that. And that's what actually clamps the string in place. If I drop those on the floor in the workshop, I would never ever find them. So I'll put them in that little pot. Along with that little screw and its washer. And then we can put that to one side. And I'll just do that for all 6 of them. Hopefully it won't take too long. And you can probably see there are the screws that we need to take out to actually get that block off the bottom. Now this isn't a genuine Floyd Rose tremolo, and my one fear is that the parts aren't interchangeable. That would be very bad, and I'm not entirely sure how I'd get around that. Well, I think I do know how I'd get around that. It would be by talking very nicely to some engineering types that I have in my acquaintance. Okay, find a screwdriver and get those screws out. And there pretty much is the Floyd Rose stripped down. You've got the main part of the bridge with the fine adjusters in, 6 saddles. This is the spring that keeps the tension on these bolts, which is what the fine tuner works against. That actually tilts the saddle against the bridge to raise or lower the pitch. And there's a little metal shim that goes between that and the block, which is what we're going to change. So we'll break out the new one and hope that it fits. And looking at that, the holes are going to line up perfectly well. So that's all good. And yeah, and those screws are spot on for size. So that's good. So we can start to reassemble all of this, and then we can get it back in the guitar and just make sure that it's actually done what we wanted it to do. Okay, so that's all gone back together lovely. Very, very pleased with that. Happy that it all fits. I'm going to put this back into the guitar off camera. We've seen that more than enough times in the last few episodes. And then I'll come back and we can see if it's actually achieved what we wanted it to. Okay, so that's back in. And the good news is everything is sat below the level of that lip where the cover plate sits. And if I'll just take out my little shim that's holding it in place, that is pretty much in the neutral position. If I pull back, everything pulls away from the cover plate. And if I let it go to its absolute furthest forward position, it is all still below that level. However, there is an issue, and I thought this might be the case, logically thinking it had to be the case. I've created a slope going down here, which means I've got clearance at this end of the springs, but as it slopes up, the springs are actually touching the bottom of there, which is not good, and we don't want that. So what I think I'm going to do is, I know I'm very, very short of material in that area, but I'm going to just take a couple of millimeters of that material out just to drop it down that little bit, and hopefully that will give us the clearance that we need. And just to kind of prove the pudding, that cover plate goes in very nicely, and we've got full range of movement on that tremolo, and there's no movement whatsoever of the cover plate, which is great. So I'm going to call that done for the time being, because I've had enough messing around with this, and I'm sure you've seen me fiddling with it more than enough. So we'll leave that for the time being, and we'll crack on and get these wings prepared and hopefully glued on. Okay, so with all that work finalised on the tremolo system and the cover, everything seems to be working pretty much okay now. So we can move on to the job I've been meaning to get onto for a long time now, and that is to actually get these body wings glued on and get this looking something a lot more reminiscent of an actual guitar. However, there's a few things we need to do before we can do that. There's a hole here that comes through for the 9-volt power to our boost circuit. There isn't a matching hole on the wing, so we need to do that. And we also need to make sure that both of the wings are properly centered on the body. We've got these splines to hold them in position, but there is some fine tuning needed to make sure that that all works properly. Now, these body wings are actually 6mm thinner than the body. So when they sit centrally, there should be a 3mm reveal top and bottom. So what I propose to do is I'm actually going to take a marking gauge set to 3mm, and I'm going to put a gauge line right the way down the back face of here, like that. And I'll just put a bit of pencil in so we can see it. And then once we actually put our wing in position and we get it ready for glue, I can make sure that I clamp that in position right to that line, and I know that it's going to be absolutely spot on. Now, I don't know if you can see that this isn't matching up with that line, and you might just be able to see there, when I pull this as hard as I can back, it's still a millimetre away from where it needs to be. It's actually a lot closer at the other end, but this end is a little bit bad, so we need to do a little bit of work there, but it is actually quite an easy fix. And all I'm going to do is quite straightforward. I'm just going to take this little shoulder plane and just gently take a little bit of material off that tenon until it comes back to the line, which it actually has done. That was all it took. And I'll just ever so gently do the same on the other one. And that is pretty much spot on now. So we'll just check the other one to make sure how that goes. I've already done the line on there, and this one actually works really, really well. So that only leaves us this little hole that we need to drill for the wires to come through, and then we can start getting these prepped up and ready for gluing on. And I've already got a mark on there where the hole is, so I can mark that. And the centre of that hole is about 20 mil. So just square this down. Measure 20 mil. And we can just drill that out. Okay, I thought that was the last job before we can do the prep, but having put this in position and had a look at it, we've actually still got a little bit of excess material here in this transition on the central section. It's about 2 millimeters. It lines up absolutely perfectly this end, but here there is just a touch too much material. So what I'll do is I will get this very quickly on the spindle sander and take that down to the line that I've just put on there. However, this does introduce another issue that I've noticed, and that is access up to the top frets. It's actually quite difficult. Just about get there with your little finger. And I think there's a couple of things there. I've probably put the fretboard a little bit too far towards the body end, but also there is quite a lot of material still on this section of the guitar. So what I propose to do is I will get the body wings glued on so I know exactly what I'm dealing with, and then I can tackle just taking some of this material out and bring that transition much further towards the body. That might mean being a little bit creative with what the back looks like, but I'm sure we can come up with something that will be absolutely spot on. This, for me, is quite a typical failing because I don't call this end of the neck the dusty end for nothing. I very rarely get this far up the fretboard, so to kind of have that as an issue is probably just indicative of my playing style as much as anything, but I'm sure we can fix it, and I'm sure we can just make that access that little bit better. Okay, and that's all fitting up really nicely now. There's a tiny little bit of finish sanding to do once it's all glued together, but it's pretty much there. So realistically, the only thing I need to do is give this a quick clean up with some fine sandpaper now, just to get the dirt off it, get all these pencil lines off it, because obviously this is going to be a lot harder to sand once it's glued onto the body. And then we can break out some glue. Okay, so that's all sanded to 240 grit now, and it's feeling lovely and smooth. I'm kind of thinking this is going to be a difficult glue up because of all the angles, so I've made some angled clamping coils, so hopefully that will help me get this all put together properly. So nothing really for it now is to get some tight bond out and get this first one glued on, and while that's going off I can then work on cleaning up and getting ready the second body wing. Okay, so that seems to have gone down okay. I'm going to do a little bit of cleanup, get rid of the squeeze out, and then we can leave that for a couple of hours to set up, take it out of its clamps, and do exactly the same with the other wing. Okay, so that's the first half on, and I think that's going to be the easy bit. I think the clamping for the second half is going to be quite complex. So I'm going to do a dry run off camera just to work out which clamps I'm going to need, and then we can break the glue out again. Well, I thought that was going to be an absolute nightmare, but in the end it was relatively straightforward. Luckily I could get a couple of clamps into these routs, which are able to get the middle, and I just need one long clamp on this end, and it all seems to have gone together really well. So I'll get this stripped back down again and we'll get some glue on it. Okay, so that's the other half glued on. That actually went a little bit easier than the first half, if I'm honest. So that was quite a pleasant surprise. I wasn't expecting that. So again, I'm going to leave this to dry up a couple of hours before we do anything else. And the next job is going to be to reprofile the back of this neck heel, just so we can get a little bit more access into the higher frets. But that's all going to be for the next episode. I'm going to leave this one here. So as always, don't forget to hit that like button if you've enjoyed this, subscribe if you haven't already done so, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye bye.